After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and make a careful search for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and incense and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. "Get up," he said. "Take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I have called my son." When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious. And he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more. And so in this passage we're going to see three kings. In the beginning we're introduced to King Herod. So we're going to spend a little bit of time with him. We see the child that was born to be King of the Jews. And we see the wise men, and I will call them, and you'll hear me in this, I will refer to them as kings as well. And so we're going to see three different kinds of kings. And we're going to start with Herod. As I was preparing this for this week, I have to admit, I went on a rabbit trail. Because Herod just kind of pops up here. And I'm thinking, who is Herod? Where did he come from? And why is he king of the Jews? He's not of the line of David. He's not even a blood-born Jew. And so I did some work on Herod, and went all the way from return out of captivity and went through Alexander the Great and the desecration of the temple and the Maccabees revolt and up to Herod. Just see, where did this guy come from? And so I'm going to give you the very much Reader's Digest version of that. Herod was a very ambitious man, but he was also an outsider. Herod's father and Herod himself were from Idumea. And if you know your geography, you remember back to Old Testament times, Idumea in the New Testament would have been Edom in the Old Testament. And if you remember where the Edomites came from, Isaac had twin sons. One was Jacob, whose name becomes the father of Israel. And so we have Jacob and his line. From there we get the 12 tribes and all that. And then there was Esau. And of course Jacob gets a blessing. Esau gives rise to the Edomites. And so here Herod is from Esau's line. He's not from the line of Israel. His mother was an Arabian. And so here you have Herod was an outsider from Idumea, which had been conquered by Judea, and the people were forced to convert to Judaism or die. So you have this outsider comes in. He seemed to have been a practicing Jew, but he was never accepted. And did I mention that he was very ambitious as well? So Herod's father was given a role in overseeing a good chunk of that land of Judea. He was in charge of kind of the public works. And he was looked at very favorably in the eyes of Rome. And so Herod's father appoints Herod to be the governor of Galilee. And very quickly, Herod shows his qualities. And when Romans were looking at a governor in a place, they were looking for really one thing out of them. Are you bringing home the taxes? And so Herod goes into being the governor of Galilee, and he is very good at keeping the people in line. Okay, think of him as being the law and order governor, and not in a very kind way. So he's suppressing any kind of rebellion, any kind of revolt. That is put down. He grows a very powerful army. He was also very good at, one biographer said, farming the taxes. And he's bringing them in. And so through a bunch of intrigues, Herod is appointed by the Roman Senate to be king of Judea. He becomes the king of the Jews. So this outsider comes in. Biographers are split all over the place with Herod. Some of them look very favorably on him. Here's one description of Herod and his accomplishments. Herod endowed his realm with massive fortresses and splendid cities, of which the two greatest were new and largely pagan. The port of Caesarea, which afterwards became the capital of Roman Palestine, and Sebaste, on the long desolate site of ancient Samaria. At Herodium, in the Judean desert, Herod built a great palace. Incredibly luxurious palace. In Jerusalem, he built the fortresses of Antonia, portions of which may still be seen beneath the convents on the Via della Rosa, and a magnificent palace. His most grandiose creation was the temple, which he wholly rebuilt. The great outer court, 35 acres in extent, is still visible. He also embellished foreign cities, Beirut, Damascus, Antioch, Rhodes, and many towns. Herod patronized the Olympic Games, whose president he became. In his own kingdom, he could not give full rein to his love of magnificence for fear of offending the Pharisees. Herod undoubtedly saw himself not merely as the patron of grateful pagans, but also as the protector of Jewry outside of Palestine, whose Gentile hosts he did all in his power to conciliate. So here we see Herod, the great builder, builds a palace, rebuilds the temple. He takes over the role of appointing high priests. And so we see Herod, the great king, the great builder. We remember him as Herod the Great. And yet, what do we learn about Herod from this passage? The Magi show up. When Herod heard what they were doing, he was greatly disturbed. And then he met with the Magi. Verse 7, Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star appeared. He said, "Go and make a careful search for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him." Really, Herod, is that what you had in mind? Herod did not maintain his position by looking kindly on any adversary. There was no opposition. That was removed. Even if the opposition was in the form of a baby. And so we see when the Magi get the message from God to go home on another route, not to return to Herod, Herod becomes furious and gives an order to kill all the male children 2 years and younger in the area of Bethlehem. Now, scholars are split on this. Some historians will say, well, that never happened. Some commentators will say there were thousands killed. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. It happened, but not to the extent of thousands. It makes it no less brutal. To protect his position, he murdered his second wife. He murdered her 2 sons, her brother, her grandfather, and her mother. He removed everything that was in opposition to him remaining as king of Judea. He altered his will 3 times, finally disinherited and killed his firstborn son. What's a few babies born in the backwater of Bethlehem to a great king? That slaying was totally in character of Herod. So we have Herod the Great, the builder, the protector of Jewry. And we have Herod, the protector of his position, and the builder of a dynasty. And that's who the wise men go and visit. And then, so there's the first king. Then we have the Magi. We didn't sing We Three Kings this morning. I was kind of disappointed that you guys didn't pick that one, but okay. We're reading my mind here. The Magi. Now, they were not kings. We don't know the number. You know, in the Bible, every once in a while, there's someone that pops up in the Bible that's just kind of mysterious. It's like, where did they come from? What's their deal? You know, in the Old Testament, Melchizedek. He just kind of shows up and you're like, where'd he come from? Where'd the Magi come from? We really don't know. But Matthew tells us, here are these mysterious Magi. They were probably scholars, some mix of astrologers and astronomers. They studied the stars. They studied sacred texts. Okay. They were definitely, as Matthew tries to make clear, they were not Jews. They were not of the family of Israel. They were pagans. They were Gentiles. But they had studied the stars. And they had studied cultures. And somehow they got this message from God that says, hey, this great thing is going to be happening. And not only were they given that message by God, but they were inspired to make this trip. Where did they come from? Babylon? Persia? They traveled hundreds, if not 1,000 miles, following a star. Now, when you put together your outreach plans, I'm sure they don't consist of, hey, we're going to go to these folks that are practicing other religions, and we're going to tell them, hey, we want you to follow the star, because you're going to see this baby, and this baby's going to become the greatest king that ever lived, and he's going to change the face of the world, and history's going to go through that. Is that your outreach plan? Okay. God has a plan. And these people, these very unlikely men, these unlikely educated men, God called them to His purposes, and they got up and they went. And what were they looking for? What drove them? I don't know. But God reveals Himself in unexpected ways to unexpected people. So there's a second Kings. And then the third king. When the Magi show up, they say to Herod, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews?" Not the one that's going to become King of the Jews, the one that was born to this. King of the Jews. The King of Kings. And as we go through the scriptures that prophesy about the coming of Jesus, I'm going to read a couple of those. And as we read through them, I want you to hear this idea of humility. This idea that we see in the Old Testament of being the least. So we saw a scripture quoted in verse 6. "But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah." You're just this small backwater town. But out of you, something great is going to happen. Zechariah 9 and 10. We usually hear this around the time of the Passover, Good Friday. "Rejoice greatly, daughter of Zion. Shout, daughter of Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, lowly, and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of the donkey." And riding on the donkey was for the low. The kings come, they're riding on the great horse, not on a lowly donkey. Zechariah goes on, "I will take away the chariots from Ephraim, and the war horses from Jerusalem, and the battle bow will be broken." It's not about military might. "He will proclaim peace to the nations. His rule will extend from sea to sea, and from the river to the ends of the earth." I'm going to do this. And it's not going to be about might. It's not going to be about conquest and conquering. It's going to be about a lowly, humble servant coming and bringing peace to the world. We read out of Isaiah 9, 2 through 7, something very familiar here at Christmas. "The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you, as people rejoice at the harvest, as warriors rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdened them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor." And so we see, what is this? Why do we have light? Because the yoke of oppression has been shattered. "Every warrior's boot used in battle, and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire." It's not about military conquest. "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given." It's about a babe in the manger. "And the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." 2,000 years later, we can get a peek into what the Magi saw. They saw into the future. They saw a world where the poor were delivered from oppression and violence. A world that's nearly impossible to imagine in our days. They saw that such a world was possible. A world where rulers are not tyrants, but where rulers are shepherds. They saw a world that's talked about in Psalm 72, 10 through 14. "May the kings of Tarshish and of distant shores bring tribute to him. May the kings of Sheba and Seba present him gifts." Think back to why. Coming from distant shores to bring him gifts. "May all kings bow down to him, and all nations serve him. For he will deliver the needy who cry out, the afflicted who have no one to help. He will take pity on the weak and the needy, and save the needy from death. He will rescue them from oppression and violence, for precious is their blood in his sight. And so if you go, what is this passage really about? It goes back to Psalm 72, 10 through 14. What's happening? The kings are coming, they're bowing down. Because one is born who is not the mighty warrior king. One is born who is the humble baby that will take away the sins of the world. So what does this all mean for us? Park on verse 3 for a minute. When King Herod heard this, the Magi come and say, where is the baby that was born king of the Jews? When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed. Here's a threat to my reign. And all Jerusalem was disturbed with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. So this all Jerusalem with him, this all, the way this is written, is referring to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. So when it says all Jerusalem, the antecedent to all, who's all referring to, who's all Jerusalem referring to? It's referring to the people's chief priests and teachers of the law. They were disturbed. Why? Shouldn't they have been looking for this day? Since we go back to Genesis chapter 3, when God makes the promise, he's going to bite at your heel, but I'm going to crush his head. Isn't this what they've been looking for? The promised Messiah? Why were they disturbed? Why weren't they the ones that say, let's go? I think there's three things going on right there. One, Herod was disturbed. If Herod ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. So they're going to appease him. Herod, we don't respect you. We don't like you. But we don't want to be in your wrath. Because we've seen how that ends. So Herod, we will appease you. Or maybe it's because Herod was appointing chief priests. And they didn't want to offend him in any way. Because that would affect my position. Or maybe they felt threatened that someone would come and say, this is really what God expects. To love justice. To love mercy. And to walk humbly with their God. But in any event, they went along with Herod. They sided with him. So what about us? How do we react to something like this? Are we like the wise men? Are we wise men? And are we wise women? Who are we willing to follow? The wise men visited Herod. They probably saw him in his palace, the Herodium. The mighty king in the magnificent palace. Armies at his command. Great building projects. Outreach to people that had been scattered throughout the Middle East. Culture. President of the Olympic Games. When the wise men visited Herod, they saw a king with the power of life and death. Our culture says, follow Herod. as all Jerusalem did, the wealthy Jerusalemites. Take what you can for yourself. Take what you can for your family. Build a legacy and go to any extreme to hang on to it. Even if it's killing off all boys in the vicinity of Bethlehem that are less than 2 years old. This year has shown us how far some leaders will go, how they will lie and cheat and steal to hold on to power, how sin becomes normalized, how greed becomes good. And we, the people, will believe and will follow. The wise men saw Herod. Then the wise men followed the star. And they went to Bethlehem. Jesus, by this time, was probably a toddler, so they found the toddler in his humble home. A poor child with a poor mother. No power. Nothing at all to associate this child with greatness. He was meek. No reason for the people to believe and to follow. Christmas shows us something different. Humility becomes greatness. Weakness is strength. Poverty is riches. The king in the palace has been shown to be nothing. A footnote in history. A page on Wikipedia. The babe in the manger that was nothing has been shown to be the king. The one that changed the course of history. The one in whom history resides. Close your eyes to the distractions and your ears to the noise. Search the scriptures. Where is God working in the world? Where is God revealing himself to you? As he revealed himself to the wise men. From beginning to end, God has not changed. Look at Jesus' messages. The Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the peacemakers. Whatever you do for the least of these, give to Caesar what is Caesar. From the book of James, take care of widows and orphans. Countless Old Testament references to do no harm to the aliens among us. Peter, reminding us that we, indeed, are aliens and strangers in this place. Leviticus 25 talks about social justice in the year of the Jubilee. Jesus says the greatest among you must become the least. That's God's message. He was never about accumulation of power and chariots and horses and luxurious palaces. Where is God moving in the world? And where do we need to get on board with that? Are we going to follow after Herod? Chase after the world, wealth, and power? The ends justify the means? Truth is irrelevant? Or, by the grace of God and the love of his Son, our Redeemer, who teaches us to love because he first loved us, may we truly seek out the child. Are we willing to find Jesus so that we may worship him? To open up our lives and give him our treasures? Whatever that may be, are we willing to open up our lives and give him our treasures, the best of us that we have? The wise men got a peek behind the curtain when they saw the baby, and it dawned on them, this is how God works. And he is going to use this child to change the face of history. May we remember that, and may we be willing to open our treasures and give God the best of ourselves. Merry Christmas. And God, may that be our prayer. And we see this world and all its distractions and all the temptations and the accumulation of wealth and power. May we turn our backs on that. And instead, see the way the world changed. And that baby was born in the manger. Maybe the wise men recognized as being Savior of the world. God, and we give you our treasures, our best, because we love you. May that be the